If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level. Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase, the podcast that helps you succeed in your business, career, and life. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group, and with me as always is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Eric?
Doing fantastic. You know, we've had winter weather coming in all across the country from north to south, so it's been interesting weather. And today, as we record this, it is Inauguration Day and Martin Luther King Day. And I thought, given the speeches of today, and of course, the famous speeches by Martin Luther King, that communications would be a pretty good topic to cover.
Yep, definitely. It's something that we all need to learn and basically learn how to really just do it right.
Right. Let's face it. Martin Luther King knew how to do it right. This is a man who gave a speech. It wasn't just his words. Everything about it moved the audience. You know, and that's something, if you can do this, it is an amazing talent.
Yep, and I'm actually old enough to remember when that happened too. So it's he was an amazing speaker, just an amazing man, period.
He wasn't, so we're going to talk today about the elements of communication. And, when most people talk about communications, they think email, they think phone calls. We're going to get more basic than that. Every message that you send has multiple elements. And it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So the first part of this, especially when you're speaking to someone, is your tone of voice. It's not just about the words. It's how you're saying the words. It's where you're putting your emphasis. It's the tone, the quality. That was something that Martin Luther King was able to absolutely manifest, was when he spoke, it was almost lyrical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, it all came from his emotions and what he stood for. Obviously, stirred emotions in a whole lot of people, and he was just incredible with the way that he did it. So, obviously, the tone of your voice is important, and the motions that you make when you're talking, eye contact. I mean, all those things are so important because if you're just talking to somebody like you're reading it off a piece of paper or something like that, even if the content is good, it's not going to make an impact at all. So, I mean, the most important thing that you can do is just practice being yourself. Get a little bit of confidence, and just be yourself when you're talking to people. Whether you're doing a presentation or one-to-one or whatever, you got to be genuine.
Absolutely. And, we had guests number of weeks back, Daniel Erb, who is a vocal coach. And one of the things that he had been talking about was the fact that to truly get your message across, you need to speak from your diaphragm. And that's because that's where the tone of your voice comes from. That's where the volume comes from. And if you can learn to do that and practice speaking from your diaphragm, you're so much more effective when you talk. It's not just this little sound you're making, it adds tone, it adds a quality to it. And again, using Martin Luther King as an example, this was something he excelled at. It didn't matter if he had a microphone or not. You heard what he was saying. You felt what he was saying. And that's because he reached down and he spoke from his diaphragm and projected. And that's so important, not just to get your words across, but that emotional content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the key things about when you're talking with people or whether you're giving a speech or whatever is your body language. And if you are
Yep.
working from your diaphragm, you are automatically going to have your body language going for you.
Absolutely. And body language is so important. And people make jokes about body language because there are groups. Growing up in a Jewish family, I saw it all the time. Growing up with Italian families, I saw it all the time, where certain ethnic groups learn to speak with their hands. And we used to joke that if we had to sit on our hands, we wouldn't be able to speak. And, and that body language is so important. And use your hands, use your arms, your eyes, make eye contact. But if this is what's natural to you, this is what you need to do. You need to use different parts of your body to get your message across. And when you're not using it, when you're holding yourself back, you're also getting a message across, but it's probably not the message you want. The way you hold your arms, if you cross them, if you're open, if you reach out to people with your hands while you're speaking, pointing at an audience in different directions, all of these have meaning. And you need to be aware of what your body language is saying. When I was in college, I had actually been doing a lot of public speaking, and I was involved in an experiment for one of the psychology classes, and I blew the experiment because it was an experiment about how you perceived other people perceiving you. So I was required to talk to a one-way mirror. So the people behind the glass could see me, but I couldn't see them. And then I was given evaluations from these people. And because I had been doing so much speaking and was so aware of my body language, the evaluations were so diametrically opposed. I immediately turned to the professor and said, "There's nobody behind the glass, is there? This is a setup." And it was, I was right. They asked how I was able to tell, and I said, because I've been speaking and I'm so aware of my body language, I know that what's being said in these evaluations didn't actually happen.
Interesting.
So you do need to be aware of that. And it's, again, your facial expressions, your eye contact, how you move. All of this sends messages. And the biggest message it sends is whether you're open or not. If you're standing there with arms crossed or your arms tight by your side, it tells the audience that you're not open to communicating. Maybe you're scared about the communication. Maybe you don't want to have this as a two-way. You just want, this is my opinion and I don't care what you think. But these are the different things that your body language tells people. And so you do really have to be aware of it in order to not just get your point across, but facilitate open communications.
Yeah, obviously, get yourself in the, no matter who you're talking to, get yourself in the proper mood and perspective for doing that. And if you need to work on it, one of the things that you and I both had to do during the pandemic was do a whole lot of stuff, presentations using Zoom. And I'll tell you, recording a presentation that I'm giving to an organization where normally I'm standing in front of people and just doing it with myself there, it really, really was hard to get my emotions and everything else into it better because the room was empty. So, I mean, sometimes just kind of playing yourself, like you were talking about, having the audience or not having the audience behind that screen there, it's so, so important. But working on it, developing your mindset, practicing it, it's so, so important. And, the Zoom experience was interesting. So, I mean, if you want to see how you come across, and you want to try and be enthusiastic, try recording yourself with a presentation just for a couple minutes to see how you're coming across, and then try it again and again and see if you get better doing it.
Yes, and you do have to be able to adapt your communication style to the medium. There's a big difference between talking on Zoom and talking in front of a live audience. Now, for some people, they're more comfortable in front of an audience, others are more comfortable on Zoom. Yeah, when they're not paying attention to the audience. But you mentioned COVID. I had a presentation scheduled that I was giving. And between the time we scheduled it, the world shut down roughly 3 days before my presentation. And so the organizers asked me, well, can you do this via Zoom? Are you comfortable? And I said, sure. I've been using Zoom for quite a while, one-to-one meetings, things like that. So I said, no problem. I get to the Zoom room to do the presentation, and I see everybody's got their cameras off. And all of a sudden, I realize how much of my presentation was geared to be interactive and get feedback from the audience. And all of a sudden, I didn't have that. And I had to literally reinvent that presentation on the fly, which was not easy.
Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, obviously, you and I are both animated as far as with our arms and our bodies and our eyes and all that other kind of thing. And it was really, really hard to just look at a screen. And, I am doing it with my hands and things like that. We do this when we talk to each other every week on this, even though you can't see us. And, but it's so, so important to do that. So if you can just relax and be yourself, no matter what medium you're using, it's so, so important to be able to do that. And the more that you do it, the better off you're going to be. I remember when I first started networking after being behind closed doors for 20 years, and my first networking meeting, I'm sitting there like, really tight and so on and so forth. And one of the best things that I learned quickly and that I teach people is that you're the only person who knows you're nervous until you tell somebody else that you are. And we've all heard people
Yep.
stand up in a meeting and say, well, I'm kind of nervous. And they just blow the room away by talking. And you wouldn't know it unless they said that to you. Everybody's got a lot of confidence issues and so on and so forth. But if you just put it beside you and do it, that's what's so, so important. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is don't take yourself so seriously. Nobody else does because everybody's worrying about the person in the mirror.
Exactly. And again, it's more than just the voice and even more than just the actions. There's also eye contact. And eye contact is very important, but it does change depending on your medium. If you're talking to somebody one to one, eye contact is easy. You look them in the eye. You don't stare at them, obviously, because that creates discomfort, but you look at them, directly in their face. When you're talking to an audience, you need to shift that around. You need to look at different people and grab their eye contact. So you're looking at multiple people at the same time. Now, that also changes again. We mentioned Zoom. If you look where somebody's eyes are on Zoom, they don't see you connecting with eye contact. Because in order to create eye contact on Zoom, you actually have to be looking at the camera, not where the person's eyes are, which for most of us is very difficult.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to look down at your presentation at the same time. I mean, basically you hold it up behind the camera so you're looking straight at the camera on your computer.
Yeah, that's why, I set things up. If I'm doing a presentation on Zoom, I set up the presentation on my computer as though it's a teleprompter so that I'm looking at the presentation, but I'm looking at the camera.
Yep, that's what I do with my PowerPoint presentations also. So it's a whole lot of fun. I think the more that you do it, the better off you're going to be. So, I mean, what I might recommend, if you're new to this, you're new to networking and meeting people and so on and so forth, just set up more time to get together one-to-one with people. If you're at networking meetings, take that step and walk up to somebody that you don't know and just introduce yourself, ask them who they are and what they do, get them to start talking, and that's going to make them more comfortable and you at the same time. So if you practice engaging people that way and letting them do the talking, your talking is going to become a whole lot more nonchalant and habit forming and very relaxing and so on and so forth just by doing that. So I would highly recommend just going out there and interacting with people as much as you possibly can. And obviously, if you're doing presentations, make sure you're hanging around afterwards to talk with the people there too, because you will get a lot of this and that from them, probably compliments, and other people might be a little bit critical, but it's all good.
Absolutely. The more you practice, the better you'll get. And again, we've talked about body language and eye contact. There's also your facial expressions. And these can be very telling and not necessarily in the way we want. The best thing you can do while you're talking to somebody, again, whether it's one on one, giving a presentation, doesn't matter, is smile. One, the smile can actually be heard in your voice. So if you're on the phone, you should be doing this too, because it changes the tone of your voice. But also, when you're smiling, it keeps other facial expressions from creeping up on you. We've all, at one point or another, gotten into trouble because somebody said something to us and we thought we were, looking at them with a straight face, and that eye roll snuck in, and you offend people that way. I know I've done this. I've apologized to people for doing this, but if you smile and you focus on what they're saying, and again, we've talked about this in other context, but don't react to what they're saying, respond to what they're saying. Take that moment. This way you stop that grimace when someone says something that you know isn't true, or the eye roll when you can't believe what you're hearing. We get into these conversations and you don't want to be reacting that way. So keep the smile on your face. And if it's not natural for you, think of something happy. Keep a happy thought in your head and you'll find it much more natural to smile. And that's also important because you want the smile to be natural. You want to come across as happy, not as patronizing or condescending, which can also be if the smile is forced.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most important things that we can do is genuinely listen to people, even when you don't agree with them. I mean, one of the key words here is just empathy, which means just whether you can't stand the person or you love the person or anywhere in between, it's just understanding and respecting where they are coming from without judgment. And if you can do that, you're going to have a lot better conversations with people, and you're also going to soften up yourself and learn to get along with people a whole lot better that way too. I mean, that's really the key to life, is just being able to understand where the other person's coming from. I mean, you and I talk a whole lot about relationships and things like that, and the most important thing that we can do is genuinely listen with empathy instead of already having our response ready before the person is done with their sentence.
Very true. And, all of these things that we're talking about are all interconnected. If you're talking with your hands and you have a very loose feel to yourself, that changes your tone of voice. It changes your eye contact. It changes your facial expressions. When you have a smile on your face, it changes your tone of voice. It can also change your body movements. So all of these things work together. And the more you can put them together to create a positive image, the better off you're going to be, because your message will get across, but also you'll make the listener feel more comfortable so that they can say what's on their mind. And you get true dialogue that way. And let's face it, even when you're giving a presentation, the ultimate goal of all of this is dialogue. You're not just there to disseminate information. You want to get feedback on how you're disseminating it, on what people think of that information. And that's why I always say, you want to have dissenting opinions, because the more you hear that, the more you get to think about what you're saying and how you're saying it. We've all seen situations where two people are arguing, but when you really listen to them, they're actually saying the same thing in two different ways. So you need to be able to put the communications hat on and go, wait a minute, what is this person actually saying? Are they agreeing with me or not? And when you don't agree, that's fine. But you need to be able to say, oh, I didn't think of it that way. But now that you mention it, what about XYZ? Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a television show called Sports Night. And Robert Guillaume played the managing editor of a sports news show, sort of like ESPN Sports Center. And I will never forget, he had this great line. He said, if you're a stupid person, surround yourself with smart people. If you're a smart person, surround yourself with smart people who disagree with you, because that's how you grow. And the communication is a big part of that. If you can talk to somebody who disagrees with you and not necessarily convince them, but come to an agreement, either that, yes, you've actually, changed your point of view, or they've changed theirs, or that you can agree to disagree and say, yes, we have differing points of view, and that's fine. But you can't get there unless you're actually getting your message across accurately. And that's where all of these different communication techniques come into play.
Yeah, and again, that's where it's so important to be listening to people too, because the bottom line is there is no matter how strongly you feel about what you're thinking, and somebody else is feeling the same way, there is no right and there is no wrong. There is no winner to an argument, even if you are forced by your boss or somebody else to agree or anything else like that. There's no winner to an argument. There are just two losers, period. That's just the way it goes. So leave your ego at the door when you're meeting people, and just, again, treat them with empathy, just listening to understand, and just realize that they are wonderful, wonderful human beings just like you are. And go to that mirror every morning and realize that there is a wonderful person smiling back at you too. And that's yourself. So pat yourself on the back every day. And I always start every day with a high five, saying, today, wherever I go, whatever I'm doing, I will be positive. Try it out. You'll love it.
Exactly. And, we've been talking a lot about how you deliver the words, but your choice of words is also very important. Different people react differently to certain words. And I remember, I spent years as a reporter, and when writing an article, we had to be very careful about the words we chose because those words did betray a point of view. And we've seen it over the last year with the situation in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel. If you're on the Israeli side, you refer to Hamas as a terrorist group. The Hamas sympathizers refer to them as freedom fighters. Now you're talking about the same people doing the same things, but those phrases have very different implications. So you have to know your audience and know where they stand and choose your words to most effectively communicate.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, basically, if you're going to categorize somebody based upon something, I mean, when you're dealing with things like this, you're looking in a big part at leadership. And if that leader is somebody that you disagree with, or is just not doing things right and so on and so forth, that ruins the whole image for everything, where most people, no matter what they are, what they believe in, are good people. And to categorize a whole group of people just based upon the actions of a very few is the wrong.
Yeah, that's so true. You have to treat people as individuals. Otherwise, you're not going to get your message across to them. So that you do need to choose those words carefully and choose how you pronounce them right. So, by choosing your words carefully, you're showing empathy and showing respect for their point of view. And that's so important. There are also a couple of other things that you need to take into consideration. There are nonverbal cues. We've talked about body language and facial expressions. There's also proximity. Now, this doesn't come into consideration when you're presenting to an audience, but when you're one on one, the physical distance between people conveys warmth or creates barriers. You know, too close might feel invasive, while too far might signal detachment. So you need to consider the physical proximity to the person you're speaking to. And also, in some cases, touch might be appropriate. A handshake, a pat on the back. These things can reinforce a connection, but it should always be appropriate for the situation and the relationship. You never want to assume that that's a welcome thing. There are a lot of people that don't want to be touched, even though that is a major part of communication. So take all of these factors into consideration and you'll be able to get your point across so much easier. And I see by the clock on the wall that we are out of time. So just remember the big takeaway this week is get your message across carefully. Utilize all these different methods, and you'll be able to convince people and influence people so that they appreciate what you're trying to communicate rather than pushing back. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.